Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party have another reason to be feeling confident today. Not only buoyed by strong polling numbers, the party just announced a record-breaking year in fundraising. The party taking in $35.2 million in 2023, $11.9 million of that being raised in the fourth quarter from about 66,000 donors. As for the Liberal Party, it came in a distant second, raising $15.6 million last year, and the NDP about $6.8 million over the same period. Well, to talk about this, we're now joined by Éric Grenier, the polls analyst, as well as the man behind the Writ. Éric, nice to see you.
Good to be here.
So $35 million in 2023. Put that into some perspective for us. Just how big is this for the Conservative Party? How big is this for any party, really?
It is enormous. It is a record-setting year for fundraising in Canada by any party, going back to the beginning of this kind of fundraising system that's been in place now for 20 years. $35 million is a new record for the Conservatives. The previous one was $31 million in 2019, and that, of course, was an election year. So what we are seeing now is that the Conservatives are able to raise more money than they do during an election, when normally that is when parties hit their record. And that $11.9 million that they raised in this quarter, again, that is another record-breaking quarter for the party. Twice before, they had raised $10 million in a quarter, but again, those were during election years. So it just shows that the Conservatives have tons of money to spend, and also it does suggest that when an election actually does come around, they could even raise even more than the amount that they're raising now, which is already a record-setting pace for them.
Yeah, and we know ahead of an election, and we heard it during the Conservative National Convention, we know that they're going to be doing more ad buys, and this money makes that easier. As I said, the Liberals came in a distant second. They raised less than half of what the Conservatives did. Is there any silver lining in that for the party?
Not much. They're behind by $20 million behind the Conservatives, which again is more than we've ever seen before, and by a lot. The previous records are more about 12 or 15 million gap between the two parties. If there is a silver lining, it might be that it wasn't worse. The amount of money that the party has raised in 2023 is almost exactly the amount they raised in 2022. And 2022 was a better year for the Liberals. They were running even with the Conservatives in the polls. This year has been a lot tougher. So it does suggest that at the very least, the people who are giving money to the Liberal Party, they aren't leaving to go to the Conservatives. They are sticking with the Liberals. It's just those voters that haven't been sticking with the Liberals. So there isn't much here for them to be happy about, but, that's the silver lining, that it could have been a lot worse for the party.
Yeah, and as for the NDP, let's go there, because a distant third. Now, the party does see itself, interestingly, with an opportunity, they argue, to position itself right now as the real alternative to Pierre Poilievre. But given the fundraising number that we're looking at there for the NDP, just how difficult will that be for the NDP if they actually don't have a war chest to fight with?
Yeah, I think that is going to be the challenge. These aren't bad figures for the New Democrats in the context of how much money they usually raise. This is actually one of their better non-election years. It's their best one since 2014. But maybe the advantage the New Democrats have is that they are fighting over a lot less of the map than the Liberals are. The Liberals do have to match the Conservatives dollar for dollar wherever they can in nearly every part of the country. The New Democrats only have to do that in a few portions of the country, so it does allow them to direct the resources to where it matters most. But the New Democrats aren't raising as much money as the other two parties by a fair margin, but they also more or less have nearly the same amount of expenses. The cost of running the party, keeping the lights on, is not that much lower for the NDP than it is for the other two. So it does make the fundraising that they do have, it doesn't go as far as the fundraising that you might see from the Conservatives and the Liberals, who do have more money to spend on something other than just salaries and office expenses.
And of course, the fundraising dollars are just one number. The other numbers that we're watching closely has to do with polling numbers right now. When you look at the different polling firms and what they've been putting out the last week or so, what does it say to you about where we are right now? If an election were held today, where would things stand?
Yeah, the polls have been pretty stable over the last little while and generally seem to be going around the 40% for the Conservatives, 25% for the Liberals, 20% for the NDP. If you look at how many seats each party would probably win with these numbers on the current electoral map, you are looking at a huge majority for the Conservatives, 194 seats right now in terms of my own projections, 76 for the Liberals, 36 for the Bloc, and 30 for the NDP. So that is a big advantage for the Conservatives, lots of cushion for them, because we see that their leads that they're building up in Ontario are pretty significant double-digit leads. Big numbers for them in British Columbia in the polls in the last couple of months. Atlantic Canada, again, a place where the Conservatives are ahead, usually by double digits. Really only Quebec is the only place we're not really seeing a lot of growth for the Conservatives, but they don't really need it. They don't need the 10 to 15 seats that they could win in Quebec right now based on how popular they are and how much support they have in those battlegrounds in Ontario and in BC.
So almost this consensus amongst all the pollsters that the Conservatives have this significant lead. Although you do write in today's edition of the Writ that both Ipsos and Nanos have Liberals making small gains. What do you make of that?
I think that it might actually suggest that the Liberals could have hit their floor. We did see in the period around mid-November to early December that the Liberals were sometimes polling at 22, 23, 24%. We haven't seen numbers like that over the first few weeks of the year. We are seeing more of the 25, 26, 27%. And again, if you're looking for silver linings, that might be the silver lining for the Liberals, right? That they are only now maybe recovering from the very lows they had at the end of the year, but they are still so far back from the Conservatives that they can't even imagine that the polls could be wrong, that they could win, because of vote efficiency, more seats than expected. They are just so far behind in so many parts of the country that being up a point or two in the polls from about a month ago probably doesn't make much of a difference at all.
Okay. Listen, while we were away, because this is primetime politics first week back as Parliament is back, a by-election date was announced for Aaron O'Toole's riding, the riding of Durham in the Toronto area. And full disclosure, I know this riding well because that's where I lived before moving to Ottawa a couple of years ago. I'm wondering what you're watching out for there. March 4 is the day of the by-election. What are you looking out for? Because historically, this is a very strong Conservative riding.
Yeah, it is very safe for them. It's stuck with the Conservatives since 2004. So even when Justin Trudeau did so well in the GTA in 2015, this riding was still Conservative. Aaron O'Toole won this by about 16.5 points last time. So there's really not much of a chance that the Conservatives are going to lose this seat. It would be a pretty big upset if they did. But I'll be looking to see if the Conservatives are going to be able to match the kind of movement we've seen in the polls. In Ontario, they're up about 10 points from where they were last time. So will they be able to get to 55% in that riding? The same kind of numbers that the Conservatives used to have in Durham in 2008, 2011, when they formed government. This will also be the first by-election that we have since the polls have shifted. The previous by-election was in Calgary in the middle of the summer. This was before the Conservatives had built their huge lead in the polls. So this will be the first test that we have of real voters putting real votes in ballot boxes. And we'll see if the numbers, the direction that they go, if they match the polls and suggest that what we're seeing in those polls is very much real.
Okay, well, we'll be watching with you. And of course, we'll speak long before then. But for now, Éric Grenier, thank you for the time.
All right, thanks.